Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Resource Gatherer. I'm your host, Justin. With me is my co-host, Cody. Today, we're going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. This time around, we're actually going to be talking about the live-action Netflix adaptation that recently dropped, now that we've had some time to view it. Again, we're not sponsored. We're just people who enjoy Avatar. This is just going to be our hot takes on a topic that seems to be trending right now. So on that note, let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode of Resource Gatherer. What are your thoughts, just your initial thoughts on the show, like pros, cons, like what did you think of the live action?
So I enjoyed the live action adaptation. You know, the characters they chose, absolutely fantastic. All of them played their roles perfectly. The special effects, the martial arts, the story itself, you know, it holds true to the original anime. It's just some of the sequencing that, I don't know, irks me, I guess, because like I'm a purist when it comes to adapting a story like from another story, like doing like your new interpretation of it, essentially. So like some of the things that bothered me, like Boomy.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't reveal what his name is right away. He makes him like try and guess and figure out what it is. Azula doesn't even show up till the end of season 1, I believe, in the original anime, and she's in by like episode 3. Iroh's son, they don't talk about that till way later. You know, just certain little things here and there. And to me, like, you know, knowing the story, and I'm like, dude, these are key issues. And one of my biggest pet peeves, I was watching with my wife. She'd never seen it. She's like, "Oh, this is really good." And, you know, not being a fan of the original one, she's like, "This is a really good show." And it is. It is a great show. But when Katara is doing her battle with Master Paku and her necklace falls off and he doesn't say that he carved that for her grandmother to, like, show that lineage connection between them, that I swear I was gonna like throw my remote like through the TV, and my wife's like, "What are you getting so upset about?" I'm like, because this is huge. Like, this is super important, minor details.
I have a pretty major detail that they decided to just completely take out. Mm-hmm. The fact that there is no. Oh, so these are spoilers, by the way. Cody didn't mention that before he started his rant. These are spoilers for the show, but there is no comet. Sozin's comet didn't occur. That was issue 1. Okay. Issue 2, the fact that the Fire Nation, without Sozin's comet, was able to kill every single airbender that was in one centralized location, just because, thematically does not make sense to the show. You are telling me that
the comet was there.
So they meant that. Was it there?
Yeah, it was there in the very first episode. That's how they were able to jump the Fire Nation, because all the airbenders were at the Southern Air Temple for the Comet Festival.
The comet, yeah, but they didn't use the comet to actually literally bring the fire down on people. They just
Gotcha. Okay. The difference on that aspect.
So what I was saying is essentially, like, in the original show, the whole ideology of Sozin's comet was that he used the power of the comet and then he dropped fire onto people.
Yes.
In this version, they didn't utilize that at all. He just showed up
and mass genocide
everyone because he was a firebender and they were like airbenders.
Yeah.
When you look at like the history of the show, especially like when you look at like Legend of Korra, for example, where you see like the power of multiple airbender combat, airbenders aren't like slumlords like that, where it like took away, like, for example, like his teacher's death. When you go into that room and you see it's just surrounded by dead firebenders and he's untouched by flames, it gives you the indication that like he messed all those dudes up when he died.
And I think part of that goes back to when Aang's talking about how airbending is more of a defensive style martial arts as opposed to an offensive style. And when you compare it to Legend of Korra, that's also a 60-year difference of, hey, I now have to repopulate the airbenders because I'm the last one. So he had all his children
Yeah,
that
but what
were
about-
airbenders and stuff, but they also had to learn how to be more offensive and defensive to continue their progression of the airbender nation.
I don't think it was that, because if you even look at like the OG Avatar series, like Aang's offensive capabilities were amazing.
Yeah.
Like he showed like prowess, and then Tenzin, his son, literally like doing some of the most like impressive feats of martial arts where he like bends over and like does the air blast. Like, so you're telling me that like an entire population of these guys, there isn't a comet that's basically giving the power up because they didn't want to use the comet effect because, and I get from a television standpoint, it actually makes sense. If they did Sozin's comet, they would have to say, hey, this is all happening within a certain timeline.
Yeah.
If they do that, you have childhood actors. Netflix learned from Stranger Things that sometimes in order for the show to progress in the way that they wanted to, the kids are going to age very quickly, especially teenagers, where they're going to go through shifts and changes, especially a young 12-year-old boy named Aang.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it makes sense that they took away the element of like, hey, this is an age restraint thing of like, but taking away the comet's like power also like completely nixed the entire like ideology that one nation could take over another because of the balance.
Correct. I don't know. I'm just like I see where they're going with it. You know, like they wanted to show like, I don't know. To me, in the live action, they're like showing the dominating power of fire as opposed to the other elements.
Sure.
Because in theory, water should be able to easily overpower fire. You know, just because of, you know, water puts out fire. You know, that's and why they attacked like the Northern Temple or the Northern Water Tribe, and they were never able to penetrate the wall. But then they came up with other creative ingenuities, like, you know, using the war balloons or different things like that. It's just, they're just showing how much more power the Fire Nation has. Not so much as, like, at this point, like, how much better their special, like, their firebending is, but also by owning so much more property and being able to coerce people into working for them that aren't necessarily fans of theirs. Such as the guy who invents all that, like the engineer, that does everything.
Which it was weird that they gave us his story. I was a little disappointed that they went that route, especially because like seeing it so early, like season 1.
Yeah,
you're like, wow, okay. I mean, granted, like he is basically a father figure to Sokka in some ways, but the problem that I had was like how they portrayed Sokka's father too. Like he's just an absentee father versus like being like
out at war
and being a tactician. They also said that he's a warrior, not like a strategist, which is another thing that was like kind of confusing. Again, these are just like my complaints as a like elitist.
Yeah.
Overall, I will say overall, I did like the series. I think if we compare it to Ong, you know, it's really hard to say that Ong really told the story, or at least Aang. He can tell the story. It's just it's a slightly coax. It's like kind of like when you watch a movie after reading the book. You're like, that's kind of where I'm at with it for other people. Like
sequencing some of the details that
are
missed.
You're like as an elitist who like reads books first. You're like, okay, yes. Did I enjoy Harry Potter? Sure. Did I think that they missed so many elements that were like great from the books? Absolutely. Did I think that a lot of the elements, even in like The Lord of the Rings, which is probably one of the better film adaptations created, did they get a lot right? Yes. Did they miss a lot of things? Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, those are 4-hour-long movies, and those books are over 1,200 pages. Like,
oh yeah, no, I'm
you know, stuff is going to get missed, and we're both aware of that.
Yeah,
you know,
like I think given the context, those elements are fine. The subtle change of like we're not going to have Sozin's Comet coming, so we can not have to stress about the year-long endeavor or whatever. Sure, I'm fine with that too. I think I know a lot of people have complained about like characters or whatever. I'm not really going to dive into that. That's not something that I really think. Like,
I thought they did a decent job on the character selection of everyone.
Yeah, I think costuming, like some of the costuming things I saw, like especially like in the first episode, they looked like they had the right look, but it kind of looked like, I don't know, for anyone who's like ever cosplayed before, it felt like cosplay costumes versus then like feeling like the like higher quality stuff. But again, I think that those looks were also like very well done. It was just so.
But have you seen the trending thing about Fire Lord Ozan?
No.
Oh my God, there are people like just geeking out over him. They're like, he has a perfect chin. He is like the perfect dude.
They did get Ozai right. I will say that. So I will say that of the actors that they got right, I think they got Katara right. I think they got.
They got Iroh right.
Yeah, so Iroh, so fun fact, he's actually, like, I've seen, because the actor, I've actually seen him, he plays in another Netflix show.
Kim's Convenience.
Yeah, Kim's Convenience.
And he's hilarious in that.
Yeah, so that's why whenever I saw him, I was like, oh, look, it's Kim's Convenience. So it's funny whenever you, like, put those pieces together of, like, moving along throughout Netflix. And then the guy who played Ozai, he's actually one of the voice actors from the original show. Yep. He was in Legend of Korra, too. And he's also, like, been in so many things. I think he was in like Lost or something like a long time ago.
I think. Well, did you catch who Avatar Roku was? Mm-hmm. From Dexter. He was the creepy pervert dude.
Yeah, it's fun. Like I said, like it's funny when you like see like the various things. I also thought that was great too because I was like, oh my God, Dexter, like love it. So now that we've kind of discussed like, our just kind of blatant like changes that we didn't like, what do you think, like, visually, do you think that the show could progress into the next season? Maybe listening to the fans a little bit in order to, like, change the overall goal or trajectory of the show so that way it can meet more in line with the demands, but also still, like, have the same feel for the next season?
Well, like, going back to sequencing, like, Aang progressively learned some waterbending before he made it to the Northern Temple.
Yes.
And Katara, obviously she's much more gifted at waterbending at first than him.
No.
Well, not at first, but like with Master Paku, she learned much better than he did.
Because she took it more seriously.
Exactly.
So the biggest thing was, and I think this was like the biggest change, so a lot of the sexism that they refer to in the show about Katara's character, about like having to always prove herself as like not only like a waterbender but also as a woman, and within amongst all these like male personalities, like between her and her brother, she had to do all of like the feminine tasks. They took a lot of those details out, but they also took out a lot of the details of like you said, like when she does her waterbending in the original show, Aang walks up and he's just like,
whoosh, doing the big waves.
Yeah, he's like, look, I'm a better waterbender than you, and I'm not even trying, because Aang was just a naturally gifted bender.
Yeah,
that was like the thing. Like that's the reason why at age 12, when most people haven't mastered their first like thing until 16, he was already had his master tattoos. Aang was a high tier master, and then you hear
he references that in the show, which I really enjoyed, was talking about he never had to struggle summoning up power.
Yes.
He had to practice restraint because like he almost blew that kid off the side of the mountain.
I do think that was a good change. I think that there were a couple changes that I really think that made the characters feel a little bit more like personable. I think that one was great. I do think Sokka and Suki's like relationship, they made it where like, because up until like Suki kisses Sokka in the show, you have no idea that Suki liked Sokka.
Yeah.
Like you're like, okay, like she's just, but like that was the kind of the point of that show was like, I'm a warrior, but also I'm a girl. Now the thing that I was a little upset by, but I understand why they didn't do, I was really hoping that they weren't going to show us Suki's face until later because the thing about Suki's character when we see her next is we didn't see her without her makeup.
And Sokka didn't even recognize her.
Yeah, and nobody recognized her. Like that was the whole point. Like she just starts talking, you're like, hey, her voice sounds really familiar, especially when you're watching this week to week. Or like, it's been, because I watched it when it first came out, so it was seasons.
Yeah.
So this is like season 3.
Yeah. That you don't see her again until season 3.
Whenever they get ready to go on to, when they're getting ready to leave the Earth Nation.
Yeah, they're going back to Ba Sing Se because it hasn't been captured yet.
And that was where I was like, okay, that makes sense. But when you have like a visually attractive actress, it makes sense that you want to take the makeup off her face and people can be like, oh yeah, she's an attractive girl.
But I mean, like, and I feel that the thing that this show has done better than the anime, because it's more difficult to do without making it like almost silly looking, I feel like in cartoons or anime, is they show their emotions so much better in the show. Like Aang's like like it's pseudo PTSD because he missed the past 100 years, but like he's like really showing like regret and doubt and like those emotions of, hey, this is all my fault because I ran away. But the thing that all these people, like, they're judging him. They're like, you disappeared, you left us, blah, 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 but you ran away. The dude's 12.
Yeah.
Do you imagine when you were 12 and you were told you have to save the world because it's about to go into chaos? Heck no.
So my issue with it, right? I do agree. The darker undertone makes sense for like the style that they're doing for this show. But the thing that kind of, I guess it's the part that like, it's the reason why I don't feel like this is the same content as the original show. It's missing the humor.
Yes.
So the biggest thing that was constant throughout the show,
Sokka's humor.
well, so the thing is they modernized it. So like Ashley's watching the show, and again, so fun fact, both of us are with people who are both named Ashley, but not the same person. We should specify that.
Yep.
But Ashley watched the show with me, and she was like laughing at Sokka's jokes. But me, on the other hand, because I'm expecting the old Sokka jokes, I'm not laughing. I'm not enjoying these jokes. I'm like, these jokes aren't funny, but I get it because, again, Netflix, when they created this content, they wanted to reach a wider audience.
Yeah.
And they were looking to take a kid show and make it more of an adult show. Like, they've even specified on their social media, like, they want to make this like Game of Thrones. They want it to be
like a serious emotional pull. Like,
yeah. And so I get why they took, but that's the thing that the show is missing. I think there's a lot that they can change. There's a lot, and I can understand why the writers would leave because of the elements they changed were so crucial to characters. So I think when it comes to a season 2,
well, like the engineer and his son in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
They were at an air temple.
Yep.
They were at Omashu.
No,
so that's a huge like,
because now we're not going to see the air temples in the same light that we saw them in, which was, again, I get it. I understand why they might do that. This is just my personal take on it. And maybe they'll do it more. I think the reason why they gave us characters in the order that they gave it to us in is because when you're looking at something from like a weekly show or whatever, it's a lot easier to explain a random character who shows up. But if you want to get a crucial character like that character is in an environment where it makes sense for them, where they're going to have to cut out like 30% of the show. I was fine with them putting him in the Earth Kingdom. I was fine with all of that. I think that the main reason why they would do it is budgeting reasons.
Yeah.
So when
they also introduced Jet in the same episode.
Yes, and they split the story where they had two different episodes occurring in the same episode, and it's
almost 3.
Yeah, it was
because they had Secret Tunnel.
Yes,
they had Jet introduction,
and they had
the air temple with the kid in the wheelchair, and Boomy's thing was going on at the same time.
I thought it started, but Boomy's episode was in the next episode. It was the same
because Aang was separated from all of them.
Right.
Now we're all in their own.
Yeah,
thing.
so it was.
So you're putting 4 episodes in one episode.
Yeah,
and I honestly felt a little lost when I'm like,
I think they tried to stuff too much into season 1. Honestly, I think what should have happened, and this is just me, I think that we should have maybe gotten through half of season 1. So, like, you would get to maybe Omashu right before they go up to and then, because the thing about this, if you wanted to segment it to make it more, like, cost effective, right? For settings or for whatever you want to do for CGI, it would have made more sense to focus on the start of their journey in the Southern Water Temple, moving all the way into the Earth Nation, doing all the Earth Nation stuff. Because the other thing too, like when you look at like Suki's episode, they didn't use the giant koi fish.
Nope.
And granted, they could have just chose not to, but I do think it was because the CGI budget probably would have been way more.
Well, think about Katara. She opens up her backpack and the waterbending scroll's in there. She didn't steal it from the pirate?
Yeah, so her but I will say that her grandmother giving her a waterbending scroll
was pretty cool.
I actually thought that was one of the elements where it changed. I was like, okay, this is actually good.
It just threw me off at first. I'm like, wait, that didn't happen. But
I also think like the way that they approached Zuko's character in the beginning was also interesting. Like, because like you show that he's not really like, because in the original show, like he's still learning his basic forms. Like he's he's going over his like he still hasn't mastered firebending. That was like his whole character arc.
It wasn't so much that he hadn't mastered it, I felt. He just wasn't as good as other people. Like he wasn't a master, that's confirmed, but he struggled with fundamentals and different things like that. So because he always had to work so much harder at everything, you know, unlike his sister Azula, who was like a prodigy in it.
Well, I actually think that the reason why, and I think this just goes back to the original creators of like style. Zuko's biggest thing was, unlike his sister, he didn't realize where firebending, like the fire within him, comes from. Mm-hmm. He always thought that fire had to be rage.
Yeah.
And so when he was raging, he's like a barbarian. When you're raging, Zuko he's good. In the first season, like anytime he's mad, that's whenever he's coming to Aang or the gang with the full grip, right?
Yeah.
But whenever he was calm and he tried to firebend, his actions and his style were...
He overthought.
Yeah, he overthought everything. Where like Azula understood that firebending didn't come from anger, it came from power.
Yeah.
And she understood that if she controlled herself and her emotions, that she could be the most powerful. And that's where, like, when you look at like the later seasons when she goes unhinged, it wasn't that she couldn't beat her brother and Katara.
Yeah.
Hands down, Azula was the strongest firebender in the world. I actually think she was stronger than Ozai.
I say I don't, just because of his raw power that he'd been doing it longer than her. Now, because Azula wasn't much older.
She was 16. She was a 16.
Zuko was what, 17?
Yeah. By the end,
she was 16 and she could like compete with her dad. No, you give her another 4 or 5 years, I guarantee you she would have overtook him.
Well, no. But what I'm saying though is that she was, I would argue, and this is just my opinion, I would argue that she was better than Ozai because Ozai didn't firebend the way that, like, because he spent a lot of his time not at war. Like he didn't go and fight in the Earth Nation War like his brother did. He stayed back in the rear, and he was more of like the thought processing. His power didn't come from his firebending, I think. It's why he needed Sozin's comet to even compete against Aang.
I just think he was the type of person that would only go into battle knowing 100% victory.
Which is why I'm saying he was more of he had the mindset for combat, right? Which is why he was such a great like villain. Where I think as a firebender, I think Azula would beat him on her best day where she wasn't unhinged, mano a mano, no like extra feats. I think she could beat him just because of the fact that her desire to beat her father would be more important to her.
I would agree with that, but I still think that if you're going to go with the greatest firebender in the world at that point,
it was Iroh
all day, because he learned other styles from studying the other elements.
But that was because, in my opinion, and it's the same thing with Zuko when you get to the end of the show,
when he can deflect the lightning. They've
evolved past just firebending, which is why I was saying, like, as a firebender, it's Azula. Because this was the thing that was interesting about the two sides of the coin, which is why I think I love the show so much, is Aang's journey as an avatar is to understand the 4 elements and to then utilize the 4 elements in his bending or his fighting style in order to create a fighting style that is a combination of all 4. Zuko, who wasn't a great firebender, utilizes the other 4 elements into his style, and he overcomes firebending as an ability, where I would say like the best firebender in the world was Azula.
Yeah.
He went up against the best firebender in the world, and he took elements because of all 4 styles. Like, for example, like he does like pushing movements that he learned from like fighting the Earth Nation. He used the water movements where you saw where he was like redirecting lightning. He used airbender movements where he's actually like flying in the air. And then you see like him utilizing the actual dragon's abilities where he actually learned like the importance of that firebending doesn't come inherently as a danger.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying, like, I really could see like that progression of a character, and I'm really hoping that we don't lose that arc, because I mean, again, we lost a lot of Sokka's arc already.
Yeah, and honestly, Sokka had one of the Sokka is the same as Zuko.
Yes,
in the aspect of like
father's approval,
teenage boys growing up. learning how to adapt to your surroundings. So Sokka was just like, I'm a man, I'm strong, I swing sword. Cool. That was what he started at. Then he learned different styles of martial arts, from the Kyoshi warriors to, like, honestly, one of his best episodes is when he gets to go hang out with the sword master.
Yes. So
Like-
that was the episode for Sokka. I don't know though. Like, I will say that what was great about Sokka's character is that throughout the show, Sokka showcases what someone who has to learn how to adapt can do when you're in a world full of, like, basically monsters, right?
Yeah.
Like literal monsters where you have flying bison and little squirrel monsters, right?
Yep.
Which is Momo, but
What was it? Lion, moose, bear, cub?
yeah, lion, moose, bear, cub, where he gets trapped, right? But like literal monsters, and then these figurative monsters of human beings with these just outstanding and crazy abilities.
Yeah.
And then there's just this guy, and he's just like, I'm the boomerang guy. But
Who was also like a pseudo father figure, because he was like the babysitter of the group, because he was the oldest. Not that he was necessarily the most mature, because that was totally Katara. She was the mature one 90% of the time. But, you know, he had to help make sure that, like, the animals were fed, they had food, camp was set up. Like, he took care of, like, the basics, because, like, Aang was 12. He never lived on his own. He didn't know what to do. Katara learned, like, the basics, like, helping out at the tribe. But Sokka, like, not only was he, like, their friend, but he was, like, their pseudo father figure, which I always find, like, somewhat ironic, because he was really good at it with a father that wasn't around, because he left for war a couple years ago during his development years.
well, and that's what I thought was like was a really nice premise for the show, was like the ideology that, like, when you look at these characters and look at how much growth they undertake in a year, mind you, in a year, 1 year of time, these children undertake a world of trauma. Literally, all of them face some of the worst trauma I've ever seen anyone take.
Oh, yeah.
And I watched it all and cried with them. Which is, again, like the live action was starting to do that, where you see like Aang's trauma and like Aang's PTSD. My only like downside, I guess, to it is it's like, because they made Aang like kind of more of a sad, more realistic kid.
Yeah.
He lost his goofy humor.
And that's, but like we said, you know, it's not as like cheery, uplifty, because that's how the show started in the anime. It was very cheery, uplifty, few dark parts here and there. And then,
Yeah,
you
like
know,
the first episodes that I think really got dark was the Scar episode.
Yeah.
Right before they go into the temple for where he actually goes on his avatar journey and meets Roku.
Well, that's like one of the best lines ever from Aang, like his first line. Do you want to go penguin sliding with me?
Yeah.
Like, there is no penguin sliding or talking about like going koi fish sailing or like all these grand adventures that he talks about in the anime. Like, it's like, woe is me. But at the same time, like, that's a realistic emotion, you know, like for people to connect with. And I think that's just what Netflix is going with, as opposed to,
Yeah, and I can get it too. Like, I mean, the fact that in this show, I think they called it Aang out more times in like the first episode, that I think he got called out in the entire show for leaving. Like, no one blamed Aang for being a 12-year-old kid who got lost in an iceberg in the original show. They weren't like, Aang, it's your fault. They were just like,
the Avatar left.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because they always say just the Avatar. They didn't know who the Avatar was. They didn't know how old the Avatar was. You know, because like it's not like, you know, modern day age, like a celebrity passes and we all know within like, you know, 2 hours on Google and Facebook or whatever else. Like, the Avatar passed at some point.
yeah.
They don't know when Roku passed to when the new Avatar was, like, people of high importance do.
Yeah.
But the common folk and stuff like that, the general word of mouth, not so much.
All right, so we're getting close to the end of our segment. So let's go ahead and let's do it like this, Cody. What would you rate this show on a 10 scale for a general audience member who has never seen Avatar? And then what would you rate it on for someone who has seen Avatar?
So, never seen Avatar. As long as you are into this type of a genre, I would give it a solid 9.
Okay.
I would easily give it a solid 9 because, like, it just, odds are you will like it unless it's just not your type of thing. So, you know, it just can't appease everyone. for someone who has seen it, like as much as me and you, I'd still give it an 8. But I would give it with the preface of your sequencing is going to be out. I won't give you spoilers, but I'll be like, you got to bear with some of the stuff because you also got to remember they put that entire season into 8 episodes.
Yeah.
So you gotta give them some creative writing over there. So 9 for people who've never seen it, 8 for the people like us.
Yeah. So I think for someone who hasn't seen it, based off of Ashley's like interactions with it, honestly, I'd probably give it a 9 for someone who hasn't seen the show. If you're just looking for like a nice, fun show to watch, that's a little more serious, but isn't going to like completely throw you over the edge where you have to like watch HBO level fantasy. Yeah. Like it's not an HBO level fantasy. We've referenced like, you know,
Game of
Thrones. It is kind of, but it's not.
It's more friendly. Like there's not like, you know, blood and guts and
it's family friendly Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I would describe it as that. If someone asked me how I would describe it, I would describe it as that. For someone who is a fan of the show, I'm gonna give it a 6.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm gonna give something so low is because the elements from a story standpoint that justify the show's purpose aren't a part of the show whatsoever. So because of that crucial element, I understand why the original writers of the show left. Mm-hmm. If the entire premise of your show is based off of this crucial element and it is not a part of the story whatsoever, what's the purpose of the story? Why does Aang have to save the world by a certain time frame or as quickly as possible? Mm-hmm. What is the end goal? Why is it important? If there is no Sozin's Comet to come back around and essentially end the world, why are we watching in the first place? And that's where we're going to end it. We'll see you guys next time on Resource Gatherer.